Hi, let's do an oceanscape. What we're gonna need for that: watercolor paper, watercolor, some brushes, some tape, water, squirt bottle, salt, sandwich wrap, and this is batting. And this is a Kleenex, a tissue, and a pencil. So let's first put the tape around the paper. What this is going to do is hold this paper still and also kind of helps it from shrinking and buckling up. So I lay it about half on the paper and half on the board, and I push it down. There you go. You could see how that could stabilize it. And here is a very, very good trick. Push down the corners, particularly, it's important to do that particularly because that's going to give us a nice little white frame. After we're finished with our painting, we take the tape off, and we don't want the watercolor to go sneaking under the corners, which it tries to do. All right, then I recommend that you put your name on it. Even though we might cover this up, get in the habit of writing your name lightly, because in a classroom situation, a lot of people might have paintings that look alike, and you don't want to get yours mixed up. All right, so step one is take your squirt bottle and squirt this paper all over. You can tell if it's wet by looking at it from the side. It shines. What this does is it gets the paper ready to receive watercolor paint, and the paint can move because it's sliding on top of the water. So a long time ago, people figured out that a lot of skies have a little bit of the primaries in them, and you probably remember what the primary colors are: red, yellow, and blue. So I start off with some real juicy, diluted crybaby yellow. I call it crybaby yellow because yellow is so delicate. If you add another color to it, it immediately stops being yellow. It just can't stand up to having other colors added to it and remain yellow. So we let it go on first. Look how wet my paper is, that's good. And I want to use a big brush to do this because I want a brush that's gonna carry the paint down without me having to mull or roughen up the paper. So what I want you to think about is that you can make watercolor do beautiful things if you tip your board, tip, 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 in any direction, up, down, diagonal. There it is. We've got a wash of glow, you could say. The next color, we want to take a rosy pink. This is called alizarin crimson, and I touch it with the brush, and I take it over here to activate it. That's what that's called when you add a little bit of water. Now this is so wet here that I can actually tap in a little bit of this pink starting on the tape and watch it crawl. Can you see it crawl over there? There we go. And I try to touch it as little as possible because I want gravity to do most of the work here. Just a nice little rosy glow. See how I grab a bunch of this juicy pink and I tap and I tip, and I roll it around, Now here's what might surprise you. I'm going to take that same color that I'm using in the sky and I'm carrying it all the way down to the bottom of the page, even though that's going to have water and sand on it. And the reason I'm doing that is the color of the light in the sky affects everything. There we go. Tip, 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 tip. Chasing it around. Looks good. Okay. So there's a little bit of housekeeping we have to do because this is made of wood. It swells when it's wet, and so you can see it's starting to have ups and downs, little hills, and it's also starting to build up on the tape. So take a paper towel and just wipe the tape part off. You can turn your board. There we go. And there we go. If you don't do this, you might get in trouble because if watercolor puddles up on the tape, it can sit there until you move your board and then it'll rush back into your painting uninvited. So there we go. Got that done. All right. You can leave it like this, like a morning picture, or if you decide, no, I think I want to have a blue sky and I want to take out some clouds, let me show you how to do that. You wet your brush and you grab a little bit of blue, activate it. That means add a little bit of water to it, stir it around. There's two kinds of blue here, and I kind of like to use both together. And here I go. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take some of that and dance it through. Am I rubbing and scrubbing? Nope. I'm just grabbing some of this activated paint and dashing it through. And what I'm also doing is seeing what looks good. If it's pretty, I'm gonna let it be. And you get to decide what pleases your eye. So this looks like a good time, if you ask me, to do a little bit of tipping. I tell my students that I'm going to give them a new name, and their new name is tip and tap, so that they'll remember they don't have to rub and scrub. They can just tap on paint and let it float and fly. And here we go, floating and flying. Now, if you say, I want to have a cloud, that's easy to do. Take your brush, put it in the water, and you're basically cleaning it off. Then you put it down on your paper towel and wipe it. Now watch what happens when I put a dry brush on this wet paper. Let's do it again. Clean it, wipe it, lay the brush down and sweep. Let's try again. Lay it down in the wet, roll it around, lift it. I'm going to pour it a little bit because it's pooling in the valleys, but that's okay. And I'm even chasing some of the paint off with a little bit of water. See how I did that? Chase, chase, chase. Okay. So that's one way. Wet, wipe, lay it down and lift. Lay it down and lift. Lay it down and lift. You can go either direction, up or down. Just keep your eyes peeled to see what looks like a cloud. There's another way, a favorite of a lot of people, me included, and that is you take a tissue and kind of wad it up a little bit, flatten it out. I like to flatten it out. I have a little bit more control. And I'm gonna lay it down and swoosh. And lay it down and tap. Remember, your new name is tap. So here's a good place to use that new name. And swoosh. And if you want to have a little rounded top cloud, just put your finger underneath like that. And you can go tap, tap, tap. And you just take a look and say, well, that's looking pretty good to me. I like that. Even clouds have a bit of a shadow side. So sometimes it's fun to go over here and get some of the same colors you used on your sky while it's still a little bit wet, and just sneak underneath the bottom part of the cloud and get the shadow side of your fluffy clouds. Just dance in there a little bit with the tip of your brush. And here we go. Let's try a little bit under there. Thank goodness our paper is still a little bit wet. It's letting us add paint, and it's letting us take away paint. Like here I go taking some away because it's still wet. When it dries, it won't help us out so much, but right now it's doing a good job. I'm chasing it. Grab some, touch, chase, touch, chase. There you go. How do you take off what you don't want? Put your finger under there and give it a little tap. Okay, we can live with that. That looks pretty good. Okay. Now, we've got to get our ocean on here. Notice too, I'm tipping the board a little bit because the paint wants to puddle in that little gully, doesn't it? So I'm kind of saying, no, I'm not gonna let you fall into that trap, and I'm just kind of nursing it out of there, scooting it along a little. It actually makes it look like a better painting anyway, to do that, I think, don't you? Okay. Good enough. So at this point, you want this to dry before you go on. You might have a hair dryer that you could use, or you could set it in the sun, or you could go eat an apple. Just take a minute waiting for it to dry.